All righty, good morning. Thank you for being with us here this morning. I am Jason Salazer, Chief of Police of the Visalia Police Department, and joining me up here this morning is Tulare County District Attorney Tim Ward. I'm going to provide a statement today on the Visalia Ransacker case and its connection to Joseph DeAngelo and the Golden State Killer, and then I'll turn over the podium over to District Attorney Tim Ward, and then after he speaks, we'll be available for questions that you may have on this case. We are here this morning to announce a significant development in a case that has long held the attention of this community. The case that we have known for the last 44 years as the Visalia Ransacker, and most tragically for the murder of Claude Snelling on September 11, 1975, as he intervened to save his daughter, who was being kidnapped by the ransacker from her home in the early morning hours on that date. Between April 1974 and December 1975, the city of Visalia suffered a string of approximately 100 residential burglaries. At the time, Visalia police detectives believed that the same suspect was responsible for all of those burglaries, and the series of crimes was dubbed the Visalia Ransacker. These crimes and the manner in which they were committed brought fear to this quiet community during the 18-month period in which the Visalia Ransacker terrorized this city in the mid-1970s. The ransacker targeted a specific geographical area within the city of Visalia where he would break into homes in the evening hours by prying open doors or windows to get into the residences. The ransacker didn't steal items of high value, rather would take collectibles, keepsake items, or photos, and he would leave valuable jewelry and take costume jewelry instead, or would take one earring from a pair, leaving the other behind. As the name implies, the ransacker would also rifle through belongings and remove items from drawers and leave them strewn about the residence. The ransacker would leave items next to doors or on doorknobs to serve as a warning system to alert him to returning residents, and at times was known to eat or prepare food in the victims' residences during his crimes. There are a few occasions where the victims of ransacker burglaries would receive strange phone calls weeks after the burglaries had occurred. The ransacker was very elusive, and investigations revealed that he likely prowled locations in victims' residences prior to committing those crimes. He likely planned escape routes for his crimes and oftentimes used a bicycle as a means of travel. In the early morning hours of September 11, 1975, Claude Snelling awoke to a sound in his residence in the 500 block of South Whitney in the city of Visalia, and he got up to investigate. Snelling encountered an unknown suspect near his carport area and discovered that the suspect was attempting to kidnap his juvenile daughter. Victim Snelling confronted the suspect, who then produced a handgun, ultimately shooting and killing victim Snelling. The suspect then immediately fled the area. It was later determined that the gun used to kill victim Snelling was a gun that had been stolen during one of the previous Visalia Ransacker residential burglaries that occurred in August of 1975. The bicycle that was believed to help Snelling's killer escape the crime scene was recovered a block away from the Snelling residence on the morning of September 12, 1975, and it was learned that that bike had been stolen from a nearby yard on September 9, 1975, 2 days before the murder. The investigation of the Snelling homicide led officers to believe that the ransacker was in fact Claude Snelling's killer. On the evening of December 10, 1975, Visalia police officers and detectives were conducting surveillance details in an attempt to capture the Visalia ransacker. During one of the details, a Visalia police officer, Detective McGowan, observed a suspicious person entering the backyard of a residence in the 1500 block of West Cahuilla. As Detective McGowan confronted that suspect, the suspect produced a handgun and fired at the officer, striking his flashlight. Detective McGowan received moderate injuries as a result of that incident, and the suspect was able to flee the area and elude capture on that evening. During this incident, Detective McGowan saw the suspect's face and was ultimately able to provide a very detailed description and a composite sketch of the suspect. After that night, the crime spree abruptly ended, and no further crimes were attributed to the Visalia Ransacker in the city of Visalia. On April 25, 2018, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department and the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office announced the arrest of 72-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo, who they identified as the Golden State Killer. The Visalia Police Department has long believed that the Visalia Ransacker crime spree from 1974 to 1975 is linked to the Golden State Killer cases. This belief was supported by the very specific MOs used by the Visalia Ransacker that were shared by the Golden State Killer. With the arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo, Visalia police detectives had new information to work with to further the long active investigation into the Ransacker cases and the Snelling homicide. With DeAngelo's arrest, we know that Joseph DeAngelo was working as a police officer in the city of Exeter from May of 1973 to August of 1976, the period of time in which the Ransacker cases were occurring in the city of Visalia and at the time of the Snelling homicide. The Visalia crimes abruptly ended in December of 75, and only a few months later, the East Area rapist crimes began in the Sacramento area, occurring between 1976 and 1979 in that jurisdiction. Beginning at the same time, Joseph DeAngelo moved to the East Sacramento area as an Auburn police officer after leaving the Exeter Police Department in 1976. Since DeAngelo's arrest, Visalia Police Department detectives have been recontacting victims and witnesses from the original investigation in an attempt to gather more information. Based on the information that detectives were able to gather, we have identified Joseph James DeAngelo as the sole suspect in the Visalia Ransacker crime series and the murder of Claude Snelling. While there is no DNA in the Visalia cases, the hard work of determined investigators over the course of the last 44 years, who never gave up in the pursuit of justice for the Ransacker victims and the Snelling family, has paid off and led to this moment. We are confident, through the information obtained from victims and witnesses, through thorough examination of specific modus operandi in these cases, through the development of physical evidence, and by linking a firearm stolen from the Ransacker burglary that was used in the Claude Snelling murder, that Joseph DeAngelo is the man responsible for these crimes. I'm proud of the fact that the Visalia Police Department has never rested in pursuit of justice in this case, and that we are able to stand here today to make this announcement. We are also grateful for the hard work of investigators across this state from several jurisdictions who also never gave up, and through their determined and tenacious use of great police work and technology, identified Joseph DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer and have helped to bring closure to our community. With that, I will turn the podium over to Tulare County District Attorney Tim Ward.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, and thank you for being here this morning. There's not a whole lot I can add to what Chief Salazer has laid out, but maybe I can provide a little perspective into the timeline of what brought us here today. I remember, like it was yesterday, in April of this year, I received a phone call from District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert. She's the Sacramento District Attorney, and District Attorney Greg Totten, the Ventura County District Attorney. They had informed me that Mr. DeAngelo had not only been identified, but was in custody, and a press release was going to be happening in Sacramento announcing the filing of charges. This is not the first time that Ms. Schubert and Mr. Totten and I and others have discussed the connection, a potential connection between the events up north and those occurring in the 1970s here in Visalia. After that phone call, my very first call was to Chief Salazer. Like those prosecutors, Chief and I have talked about this case before. I informed him of the development and instantly committed all the resources that the District Attorney's Office has available. Really twofold. One, to assist the prosecutors' offices across the state who had already filed charges, if there was anything that our Bureau could provide them to assist in their cases. And second, to work side by side with the members of the Visalia Police Department to determine if we could get to the point where we are today. And today, I have instructed my staff to file first-degree murder charges against Joseph DeAngelo for the 1975 murder of Mr. Claude Snelling. And in doing so, I hope that we can take what is really our first step in not only holding him accountable for the crime here in Visalia, but really providing justice not only to the victim's family, but to a community at whole. And I say that because going back from the spring of 1974, this community was terrorized by these rampant crimes in their tenacity, their intimate nature, and the frequency in which they were occurring. These crimes culminated, if you will, in the fall and winter of 1975 with the tragic murder of Mr. Snelling. And as Chief Salazer mentioned, as abruptly as they started, soon after in the winter of 1975, they abruptly ended here in Visalia. Now, we tragically know they continued elsewhere in the state. However, though the 40 years have transpired and the fear in this community subsided somewhat, those wounds never healed, and the community was never given justice, and the victim's family was never given justice. That's why I'm proud to stand here today and say that we've taken that first step in providing that justice and that closure, not only for the victim's family, but for this community as a whole. To think that the crimes that now we see from the charges filed across the state may have originated in our quaint, quiet, wonderful little town is quite startling. But with this filing, we have officially linked the Visalia Ransacker to be the same individual that is known as the East Area Rapist and, tragically, the Golden State Killer. Here in Visalia, it seemed that the murder of Mr. Snelling touched a really compassionate and brought sorrow from not only the victim's family, but from a community and this town and this county and the surrounding area. Because at its core, aside from everything else, Mr. Snelling died trying to save his daughter from an intruder inside their home in the early morning hours. And in doing so, he saved his teenage daughter, but he became a hero to her that night and to the community. For he was, at that time, a professor at our local college. He was a husband, he was a father, and he was her hero. And to many in the community, that aspect of a father giving his life to save his daughter resonated then, and to this very day, it continues. So I'm proud to congratulate Chief Salazer and the men and women in the Visalia Police Department for all their hard work and the efforts they put in. And let me say, much has been made across the state about the science and the technology of how the other jurisdictions got to where they are. But I can tell you, as Chief Salazer mentioned, the science and the DNA played less of a role here, as did good old-fashioned, tenacious, dedicated police work. And to that, I think that department. I will tell you, though, and let me finish with this, I am completely confident that we collectively as a community would not be standing here today but for the hard work and the dedication not only of law enforcement officers across this state, but from prosecutors as well. When you look at what the other agencies have brought to the table, I'm confident in saying we would not be here today but for their work. And I'm talking about District Attorney Tony Rackauckus of Orange County and the work that his expert DNA lab was able to bring to the table. Santa Barbara County District Attorney Joyce Dudley has filed charges in her county. And some of you from a historical perspective may remember District Attorney Dudley and I worked together on a cooperative prosecution many years ago of an individual, Jose Martinez, who committed crimes in Santa Barbara, and those crimes were prosecuted here in Tulare County. I can tell you that Ms. Dudley and I have had a number of conversations that have helped us get to where we are today. And then finally, but certainly but not least, without the effort of the men and women, not only in law enforcement, but the prosecutors in Ventura County and Sacramento County, again, I just can't thank them enough, because we would not be here as a community without their work, and I thank them, and we've dedicated our resources to help those other agencies as much as we can. So with that, I will end. I will tell you that we will make press release information available. It will be released today. There will be information available not only on the social media accounts of the Tulare County District Attorney's access pages, but also those of the Visalia Police Department. And for anyone that is so inclined, we have Spanish interview comments available from Lieutenant Alvarez of the Visalia Police Department is present and able to handle that. So with that, I will end and tell you that I know there are a lot of questions that are still out there. And I'm going to ask, as we've asked the community time and time again collectively, to be patient with us. not only with us, but the other counties as well. There will be a time for, an appropriate time for more information to come out. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chief Salazar, and we'll answer some questions.
What about the Visalia Ransacker is accused of a number of burglaries? What about burglary charges?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. The question is, why aren't charges such as the burglaries filed? And I can tell you that any crime that does not have a statute of limitations that's passed that we could prosecute, we file. There are a number of crimes such as burglary, the kidnapping, that the statute of limitations has passed, and we're simply unable to file those charges. The only charge that we could file that has not passed the statute of limitation is the murder of Mr. Snelling.
Is that the only case that you're actively investigating here in Tulare County?
I can't speak for the other police agencies, but I think it's fair to say that our police agencies are involved in active investigations, and I would refer those questions to their departments, and I'll let Chief, if you could talk.
This is the only additional case that the Visalia Police Department is investigating with regards to ransacker activity in the city of Visalia. It's the only homicide in the city of Visalia that we're investigating with regards to the ransacker and Joseph DeAngelo at this time.
Chief, we had a news conference back in April. We asked people, you guys asked us to tell people in the public, call if you have any information, if you remember him. What was the reaction that police got from that?
I think obviously this is a case that for 44 years has generated a great deal of interest in Visalia. It's really part of its history. In the 25 years that I've been with the Visalia Police Department, it's always been a case that you've been aware of. So when we came out in April and asked for public assistance, and we got public assistance, this is a case that over the years has always generated tips throughout the years, and the number and thousands of tips that have come over the course of those 4 decades to help our investigators. So we did get some positive feedback from the community. We did get participation from them. Most importantly, we were able to go out and recontact victims and witnesses who are still here and still very invested in what happened back in the mid-'70s, and their cooperation as we renewed this investigation with new information was vital to where we are today.
Tim, when and where will DeAngelo be arraigned for this murder charge?
That's a question that I simply don't have an answer for, Brian. The question is what's next, really, for his arraignment. As you know, he is in custody in Sacramento County, pending charges there. Obviously, that is a topic that I and the other prosecutors around the state will have to address, but Brian, I simply don't have an answer for you on that. I would refer you to the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office.
Chief, what is there other than descriptions of the suspect, the fact that he lived here and was a police officer? Is there physical evidence linking him to this killing?
So obviously, probably the biggest piece is the criminal had a very specific modus operandi in the way that he committed these crimes. But through that modus of operandi and physical evidence, we've been able to link the Visalia Ransacker to the Snelling homicide. So we know that those are connected. There is additional physical evidence that we have and are continuing to work. I'm not going to get into specifics of that. As the district attorney mentioned, those are things that will play out as the prosecution of this case move forward. But in addition to the physical description, the MO of the suspect, there is some physical evidence that we have that can link him to these crimes, although we do not have DNA.
Did you say that you recovered the gun?
Yes, so we've not recovered the gun. We do have ballistics information that allowed us to link a gun that was stolen from a ransacker burglary to the Snelling homicide.
But you never recovered the weapon?
Yes.
The physical evidence that you have that is connecting, was that found at his home?
No.
Mr. Snelling's daughter declined to comment to the media, but have you guys told her this development? If so, what was her reaction?
Yes, so members of the Victim Witness Program from the Tulare County District Attorneys have been in touch with Elizabeth Hupp, as have detectives from the Visalia Police Department. So we've been in constant contact with her and the family through the years, and obviously very much so in the course of the last few days as this case has developed.
Tim, will the complaint be filed today?
That's correct. The complaint has, let me confirm that, I believe the complaint has already been filed today.
And Chief, just to make sure, the number of cases of Visalia Ransacker, more or less?
102 cases that we attribute, so 100 of those are burglaries or attempted burglaries that occurred during that 18-month period. And then you have the Snelling homicide case, and then as well as the case of the attempted murder against Officer McGowan that occurred in December of '75.
Were there any sexual assaults associated with that crime spree?
We're not aware of any sexual assaults that are attributed to specifically to the ransacker or that we're investigating at this time. Primarily, the activity that he had here was burglaries, prowling, attempted burglaries, and then obviously the violent crimes against Mr. Snelling and Detective McGowan. So none that we're aware of.
How much more work is there for detectives going forward?
You know, the work of the detectives never really stops until we get the conviction in the case. So while they've done a great deal of work to get us to this point to where allow the district attorney to make a filing, there is still obviously work to be done. We will continue to work with victims and witnesses. We will continue to look at cases that may be linked. We'll do everything we can to make sure that this investigation is as solid as it can be as it goes to court. As I mentioned, there is some physical evidence that we continue to work with and investigate, so their work is not yet done. And a large part of what that happens comes through the testimony of the detectives and the witnesses as that progresses. So
About how many witnesses are we looking at?
I don't have the number of witnesses, as many as we could contact over that are still around or available from 102 crimes that occurred in that time. Any other questions? Okay, as the district attorney mentioned, we'll have a press release that the DA's office will be sending out with additional information. Additional information is also available on the Tulare County District Attorney's social media pages, as well as Visalia Police Department. And for Spanish interview, if necessary, we have Lieutenant Alvarez here available. And,
Chief and Tim, quick question, how many people in your respective offices have been working on this? Yeah?
currently, we probably got about, our violent crimes unit, maybe about 3 or 4 of the detectives that have been working on it. One particularly has been kind of the lead investigator on that. But over the course of 44 years, we've always had somebody assigned to work this case. And I don't have the number over the years, but it's quite a few that have worked this case over the years, as is the case for the number of other jurisdictions that I know we spoke about. So a lot of law enforcement resources have gone into this investigation, and ultimately great work has led us to this point.
Chief, let me ask you, the fact that he was a police officer, how does that affect you as a chief? I mean, knowing he was a police officer to serve and protect, now you find out he was a police officer. What do you think of that?
It's one of the last things you want to hear. Certainly it's disappointing. We take great pride in the badge and the work that we do. That's what we represent is public safety and honor and integrity. And so when you hear something like this, whether it's this case or any other, it's certainly disappointing. Having said that, though, he is not representative of the great men and women in law enforcement that serve our communities every day, and certainly those that have brought him to justice. And so we're proud of the work that they have done to get us to this point. And obviously, he had no business being in the profession he was in, and he's not anymore.
Tim, how many people in your office working?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. From the time that I got the phone call from District Attorney Schubert and Mr. Totten, I assigned a senior prosecutor, really at that time, to work, coordinate with them, as well as members of our Bureau of Investigation, to make sure that any information that was available down here would be at their use. At the same time, I tasked Assistant District Attorney Dave Alabesos with working with the Visalia Police Department in conjunction with the other prosecutor, Senior Attorney Mitch Nayesh, in reviewing office that wasn't engaged in the process. And I think that when we internally started talking about handling this case, we had all kinds of prosecutors coming forward, wanted to help, support staff, our paralegals, everybody was willing to be a part of this. But our Bureau of Investigations has assisted those other agencies all across the state. If you think about it, we're kind of centrally located between all the different counties. So if we can help in any logistical role, I've made that commitment to those other counties that we will certainly do that, and to the Visalia Police Department as well. If there's something that needs to be transported either to Orange County or to Sacramento, to Santa Barbara or Ventura, our Bureau is assisted in that. So.
Have you decided on pursuing the death penalty?
You know, punishment is going to be something that I think collectively will have to be talked about. We're simply not there yet, and it's not appropriate really to talk about that. That's one of those things that I think that'll have to be worked out.
Tim, with as long as this happened, again, with all the time that's gone by, what do you expect to be some of the big challenges in prosecuting a case like this?
Yeah, well, one would be you have to, I think, acknowledge that the Visalia case is part of a big picture of crime spree across the state. From that regard, you know, the volume of the case is huge. From a real standpoint that I can I've talked with Jason about a lot, Chief Salazer, you know, we're talking about a crime that occurred over 40 years ago. And obviously, time's not on our side in that regard. So that's, Liz, I think that's going to be one of the challenges going forward is, you know, a lot of the officers that were involved simply are not with us anymore, unfortunately. Some of the witnesses aren't with us anymore as well. So that's a challenge that I'm sure other jurisdictions are facing as well. But the reality is that's something that we've overcome before, and we're going to do everything we can to collectively make sure that those hurdles can be met and justice be brought not only to the victim, but again, like I said, to the community as a whole.
Okay. Thank you all for coming this morning, and we'll be available. Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. You know what? I can give you. Hey, man. This is